All systems go. Clear for liftoff. What's up, everyone? Tyler Tamboline here, a.k.a. ToeTagginTambo, back for another edition of the Takedown Breakdown here on the Ship It Nation YouTube station. We have a special one this week. We are going to break down the Millie Maker winner from yesterday, from Week 12. We'll break down some of the plays, the lineups, the construction, how the slate went, how it shook out with the chalk, etc. But as you see here, got Nades with me as usual, and special guest. He goes by Stat ATL. My man Billy did some stuff with me last year. We did a Thanksgiving show last year, and this show is going to feature a special Thanksgiving first look with both looking at the options and talking the strategy. So Billy, as the special guest, I'm going to bring you in first, my man. How's it going on this fine Monday morning of a holiday week for my American friends, which, as you know, I'm mostly American, even though I'm Canadian?
Yeah, man, it's going great. This is like my favorite week of the year for daily fantasy stuff. I think congrats to you. I think on multiple fronts. One great takedown last night, but popped up on my timeline, like Facebook memories, whatever. I mean, it wasn't a Facebook thing, but I think 1 year, right, with DFS Mastermind was just came up this past week. So that kind of popped up on my timeline. So just wanted to say congrats to you, man.
Yeah, certainly appreciate it. The project has been a lot of fun over at Ship It Nation, running that through and getting tons of people from across the nation and at other places, different faces like you over at 1 Week Season. We'll talk more about that in a bit, but you and I did do a 2 to 4 game strategy show over there. So that's awesome. And then Nades, you and I have done some stuff with the Stone and how to use SaberSim and incorporate all the stuff that we do at Ship It Nation. So when someone like I'm Steven says, how can an optimizer take the information and get the puzzle correct? I'm sure I'm not the only one that had the right pieces, but not in the right combination. That's part of it. You got to get the right combination. The winner, JB Gigglesworth, actually was the winner of the $20 Millie Maker, did get those pieces together, but we'll be able to show you where you can find them. And I think the key component is that, as we always say on this show, your inputs are your outputs. So if you spread your inputs too thin, you could have a lot of the right pieces, but you may not get the right combination if you're not playing enough lineups. I'm not saying that you have to play more. I'm just saying if you only have so many lineups, it's like somebody who plays single entry every week. I applaud that, and I think it's great. But if you don't win all the time, it's because it's tough. And when you only have one lineup to get there with, it can make it even tougher. But Nades, I'll bring you in, man. How was your Week 12? And any thoughts going into this holiday week? This should be a fun show, breaking it all down.
Yeah, got fairly close last night in Showdown. Obviously, everybody can say that. Week 12 main slate wasn't the best. Again, had a lot of the right pieces, but again, I'm a 3 max, 5 max type player, so it's really tough, right, when you're kind of underexposed to a game and you attack the game a certain way and it didn't go your way, and that's the nature of the beast, right? Typically, you're going to lose pretty much everything you put in that week there. So overall, not the best week, but we got a big one tonight, and then obviously we got a big slate ahead coming Thursday that we're going to talk about too. So looking forward to breaking it all down here.
Yeah, the pricing came out first thing this morning. Me and Billy were talking last night. Like, how is it still not out? Even FanDuel beat them to the punch right there. So let's go through this here. Just give me 1 second on that. We'll see. One thing I want to bring up first was Philly Phantom, who up here said three profitable weeks in a row, thanks to the nation. Amazing stuff. And then said, still rocking the stash. Yeah, I got a text from Mayo this morning, said, Millie Maker. No. That's $1 million guaranteed prize pool last night. That was more like hashtag chop it than hashtag ship it. It was 29,000. So I'm very happy, grateful, and I'll take it. I have no clue how that lineup held up, because when I went to bed, it was like there was a Stafford version directly below it that somehow he did not get any more yardage or bonuses or really anything that did enough to get him over the top. So very thankful for that this week. But Billy, did you have anything when it comes to this question? I'll give you a run at this. Obviously, you and I have talked a ton of strategy in the past. What's your thoughts about the right pieces? And I mean, you've talked about going 100 miles an hour in your own lane, but what's your thoughts on this?
So I guess I'll lead in by saying I lean more towards Austin's than you in terms of rosters. So it's different if you're playing 150, 300 rosters. But generally on most slates, like if you're playing 150 rosters, like you're going to have all the right pieces because you're playing so many players, so that, it's everybody had all the right pieces in their pool. To me, it's just, you've got to be really, truly willing to lose. If you're not playing 150 rosters, if you're playing 20, 30 rosters or less a week, like, we talk about this a lot. I'm sure you guys talk about it a lot behind the paywall. Like, you've got to be willing to trim the player pool. Like, you just can't play everybody, or else, like, you just really have no shot of getting to the top of the leaderboard.
Yeah, some good points there for sure. And I think it also has to be dictated by, what your thoughts are on the slate. Like, if you like 7 quarterbacks, it's probably not a good week for single entry, and you may have to figure out what a 3 max looks like and still trim that down. But I'm just saying, or a 5 max, or playing 20 in the $3.20 max as opposed to 1 in the $50 single entry, or however you usually play. So you should be dictating the slate based off of that. I can't speak on that enough. It's something we talk about a ton over at Ship It Nation, you guys over at 1 Week Season, and then same within the Mastermind project, which you did talk about. So I'll bring it up quickly because it has been a year. Yesterday was the 1-year anniversary of the Mastermind project, and there'll be some changes in 2026. So I'm just going to bring it up now quickly. We've talked some stuff behind the scenes on. I'll get all that out of the way here quickly just before we hop in. We will be breaking down the perfect lineup as you see there on the screen. We will be breaking down the $20 Millie Maker with JB Gigglesworth, but getting this out of the way quickly just so everybody knows what's going on. If you go to Ship It Nation, you go to more, you can see Mastermind right there. I'm only leaving the one-time option open until the end of 2025. So anyone who has already got in on the one-time option, you're good forever. You'll be in all the new add-ons, etc. In 2026, we've hit a sort of threshold where I'm very comfortable just changing it based on the setup. We talked about it. When you get into it, there's a ton of different things that you get within the project. The strategy stuff like Billy and I have done and Nades and I have done. There's the learning events where we go through and talk about certain sports, the case studies, the exclusive interviews with all the DFS pros around the industry, the community controlled content where you can help sort of come up with ideas of what we're doing, a separate private Discord, everything that goes with that. And the pricing is very simple. Right now it is $297 to get in. One time you're done. You don't ever pay again. You get everything else that comes with it. Or you could do a $99. There's no extra payment. It's just you get in for less upfront. But it's basically going to end at the end of 2025, where I've said this to people within the project, and they know they're still going to get everything as is, but it will be pieced out. So right now when you join, you get, I'll show you here quickly. You get both of my courses, Mind Map and Mind Map 2. So that is the top 10 topics, tips, tricks, and tidbits that everybody sent in and wanted to know. This is a 3.5-hour course. This is an additional 3.5-hour course breaking down all the other questions that people asked about. And if you go to shipitnation.com/mastermind, you can scroll down and click on the courses and you'll be able to see everything they entail. Not going to spend too much time on that now, but there is 2 more bonuses you get if you join the one-time package before the end of 2025. So you have a month and a few days. You get the podcast only package. So you will get everything else in podcast only format. So all the stuff that's already on the site, you will get the podcast version unlocked as well. So you can listen to it at the gym, on the way home, on vacation, whatever it is you want. You will get the NFL DFS mega course, which breaks down a lot of what we're talking about and includes the 2 to 4 game slate. By the way, Billy, that was an hour and 15 minutes. I looked it up today that you and I spent on that, breaking it down. I think I have it here. An hour and 16 minutes you see on the screen just for a 2 to 4 game slate. There is Thanksgiving, there is Christmas, there is all the playoff slates, there's everything else that goes with it. So I'll let you talk on that in a minute, but that's everything that you get included, and you don't have to listen to me talk about it. If you go to the site as well, shipitnation.com/mastermind, you can see the video testimonials right here, and then you can click see more testimonials, and it will open up to over 200 testimonials from DFS players like yourself around the world that are playing DFS and the interviews they've watched and things that they've learned and picked up. So Billy, you've been involved with it. We did this course together. You want to add maybe 2 seconds on it and then we'll hop into the winning lineups. Anything else there?
Yeah, no, I think you hit on it well. It's just, Thanksgiving along with kind of like the playoffs for NFL is just one of these really unique animals in that, it's a short slate, but that they're staggered where, you've got a, for the playoffs, it's, overnight. For Thanksgiving, it's, 30 minutes, an hour. But it kind of allows you to build the plane, as you fly type deal. Because you're gaining more and more information as the slate goes on. It's really what makes it, what separates it from a regular main slate.
Yeah, I love your talk there. Like, a lot of people don't know how to handle the staggered starts, and those can be highly advantageous. That's one of the edges still left. I know people struggle with late swap, but late swap, when you have a staggered start, is another animal, and it can work really well in your favor. I know we're going to talk about some of that at the end. And Nades, I know you've been part of Mastermind since day one. You've helped me out with some stuff over there as well. This course with Billy, I know, made a ton of people money just last year to start this thing off, rolling into Thanksgiving, and that people applied it throughout. Do you have anything else you want to add on this or the Mastermind project in general? And then we'll dive right into the perfect lineup.
No, a lot of what we talk about on the show every week, a lot of you guys in the chat have watched this multiple weeks in a row or trickle in throughout. I would just say it takes it a step further, right? Everybody talks about how to try and teach you, right? They talk it, but they don't walk the walk, right? Everyone across the industry, right? Not bashing anyone, but everyone says, oh, we teach you how to do this, this, and this. And that's truly not the case, right? It's just a marketing scheme to get you to sign up. This is truly a course that helps you and teaches you the ins and outs of DFS. And again, it's not to say that you're going to sign up and you're going to win millions of dollars, but there's many DFS pros that have come on, done interviews. There's process videos on how to build a process, right? Everybody tells you, oh, stick to your process, and doesn't teach you how to build a process, right? So kind of takes you back to square one, right? Even if you're rudimentary and brand new in NFL DFS or any sport DFS, kind of gives you the framework, right, to work as much as you want, right? You can learn as much or as little as you want if you sign up for it, but the value there is absolutely incredible for what you can get out of it, truly.
Yeah, if you're watching this show, it's definitely for you. But like I say, always say, and if you're not a member of Ship It Nation yet, start there, get access to the tools. We're going to show you in a little bit with the Millie Maker winner how you could have found that for your own stuff or get close to it. I always say this too, Billy, is like in the single entry stuff, a lot of this show is based on MME, to your point, of people playing 150 rosters and having multiple scenarios and whatnot. But you can also just adapt your play to whatever fits your needs, bankroll, contest selection, etc. If you're a one lineup player, it's probably better to play it in a single entry and find something that suits your needs, smaller field, still has a really good payout structure, etc., etc. And then you can reverse engineer some of this stuff. You may not, as Coach Sav says, it's pretty interesting. This week's Millie was almost the perfect score, so you could see it on the screen. You may not land on the optimal or the exact lineup that would have won the $20 Millie Maker, but that's often not what it takes. I think this is just using, again, you could scale this up or down. I think the $150 3 max was a $250 versus the $20 Millie Maker was a $275 versus the fully capped out optimal. And I'll let you take this one first, Billy. You see it there on the screen, was $295. This is how it shook out. You had Jameis Winston, Robinson with Gibbs. You had Emmanuel Wilson with no Josh Jacobs. You had the Jackson Smith and Jigba, the big game. Shout out to my guy, Alex Blickel. That was his leverage lane on the Saturday show over here at Ship It Nation. You plug in the Michael Wilson chalk, who made sense at 4,800, still no Marv Harrison, etc. You get a piece of the New England side with Henry, piece of the Philly game with A.J. Brown, and then you land on the Cardinals defense at 2,700. It was 50K flat. And we review this one, Billy, obviously, because it's the perfect lineup. It's the optimal. But just to sort of work our way backwards, I would say this is probably the most optimal we've ever seen, where it's like everybody still landed on all these options. It wasn't like last week with Gainwell and Sean Tucker. So give us your first thoughts here, Billy, on this one.
I mean, outside of Jameis Winston, Wan'Dale Robinson, was anyone on this lineup low owned, like under 10% owned? I mean, I don't even know that Wan'Dale Robinson was under 10% owned. This doesn't have ownership on it. I'm just
no.
Everybody else is really highly owned.
Yeah, the chalk definitely smashed yesterday. I know that was the case. I can guarantee you one thing: I'll always take my L's where I need to. The 4v4 swap the chalk core did not work because that included Gibbs, Wilson, and Chase Brown, and it was really out of the spite of like Chase Brown and Emmanuel Wilson, who we knew were great plays. But it was like, is there a way that you could flip it and make it so that doesn't hit? And if you wanted to be on popular stacks, typically you'll want to find ways within those builds to get different a little bit. And I thought that was a way to do it. I felt like Henderson had a ton of opportunities. He was way ahead of the market share, what people had him at. I think he ended up getting double-digit carries up to the teens, high teens, and just didn't get it on the 1 yard line stuff, and that's fine. And then I think Henry was great. Had 2, could have had 3 touchdowns for Baltimore. He did still end up in some places there. And then Montgomery was the one that got crushed. I think, Nades, that was one of the things on this slate, is because if you didn't find the Winston Wandale stuff, let's say, because to Billy's point, Wandale still got to 7.7, I think, in the $20. It was like he was just under 10, and Winston only 4. He was the guy that could make it all work. But what they allowed you to do was to get to the Gibbs and the St. Browns of the world, where many of us were content with saying, if they're going to put up 30 plus, why not Montgomery? Why not Jameson Williams? And then, of course, we'd seen Dan Campbell say that he wants to get them involved, take over the play calling, and get Jameson Williams involved. But we just didn't see those drives. JMO has an O in it, which we always know can turn into a 0. That's what happened yesterday, kind of like Romo Dunze a couple of weeks ago with double zeros in his lineup in his name, because that's how it goes. But Nades, your thoughts?
Yeah, the first thing I see here is how you could have landed on something like this, right? Is you knew everybody wanted to go in on that Lions game, right? That was the game of the week. But everybody was trying to figure out how to get the golf side right? And how to figure out the golf side. Nobody was really thinking, okay, if the Lions are truly hitting their ceiling, I get it, right? Dan Campbell will run up the score and all of this and all of that nonsense. But at the end of the week, I mean, it's still second half of the season, week 12 with a short week, right? You really truly thought he was going to really run up his guys out there with a short turnaround coming on Thanksgiving. And if that's the case, if those guys are getting there to the ceiling that everybody thinks they are because they want to play them with ownership, you have to assume at least somewhere on the other side. I mean, the Giants have to score somewhat. And a $4,600 quarterback when most are stopping at Jacoby Brissett at $5,300, right? That's kind of how you could have landed on this and then just fit it, because it unlocked the ceilings of a guy like JSN, a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs, how to play Gibbs differently, which we'll talk about when we go into the Stack Seeker. That's how you do it, right? You play the other side of the chalk game that everybody wants. How many times have we seen this? I know you had talked about it a couple times on the show yesterday, talking about everybody's on one side of the game. How come nobody wants the other quarterback at all when you know Jameis just chucks it regardless of whatever the game script is? I mean, he's always done that. We know that from playing fantasy. So I think that's really important. The other thing I know, what's the other piece you want to know? Everybody wanted Trey McBride, right? Well, how does Trey McBride not get there? Well, it's because a cheaper tight end like a Hunter Henry, who leverages Mark Andrews at the same price, leverages the spend up Trey McBride to get you on a different roster construction. And how does Trey McBride not get there? Well, maybe it's Michael Wilson taking the touches, taking the touchdowns, and then you pair it up with the defense, because if the game's not competitive or if they're kind of just walking the game, right, maybe they save Trey McBride as well. So that's kind of some additional thoughts that I had on this, and spent more time on the perfect here, because when we get to the actual winning lineup of the $20, it's going to be very, very similar to what we see here.
Yeah, it's not that far off. The way they put it together was actually quite nice. Obviously, like you see, I think JB Gigglesworth, so I didn't look it up, but here's 2 lineups in the top 8 that were close. Some other names within there, but I think JB Gigglesworth getting the win here, Billy, was a Jameis, Robinson with Amon-Ra and Gibbs, then went with Emmanuel Wilson, did the double Philly spend with Devonta and AJ Brown, and then had Hunter Henry and the Cleveland defense. So this really fits your point before, and that's where I saw the 7.7. Yeah, so it was a 4% Jameis, a 7.7 Robinson, and then nobody less than 13.3, but really mostly over 20 up to 38%. So it's just not who you play, it's how you play them. This definitely got the job done and cleared second place by 5 points. Even second place was a dupe, actually. So that's interesting too. You don't often see that, but when this much chalk hits, kind of makes sense, but it was a bit different version. But anything you want to add on this one, Billy?
I mean, the top half of this roster, I prefer to the optimal, just because I feel like this is easier to land on. Like, to me, I like to make really correlated bets with like Jahmyr Gibbs, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Wan'Dale Robinson, Jameis Winston, where, hey, if this game goes off and I'm right with how it plays out, I'm now getting 4 pieces right with one bet. It's kind of like if you look at a roster as a nine-digit code or crack, something you got to crack here, 9 digits, 9 odds, if you can get 4 things right with one bet, it makes it so much more likely that you can get 5 more things right than if you only go with a skinny stack and now you got to get 7 more things right versus 5 more things. People think, oh, it's only 2 more things right, but it's infinitely so much more difficult to get those 2 more things right by just going a skinny stack versus kind of leaning into a game a little bit more. And, if you look at the game, like we were expecting Detroit to score 4 or 5 touchdowns. This is literally just picking the 2 most likely players on Detroit to have big games in Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown. And then to Austin's point of what makes sense on the other side, it's grabbing Jameis Winston, a guy who we know is going to throw the ball a ton. He's got some rushing upside. He had a rushing touchdown last week. Not saying you're expecting that, but he at least has that in his range of outcomes. And then you're kind of going with his wide receiver 1. Wasn't a spot I was on. For me, I was on Darius Slayton and Theo Johnson a lot more than Wan'Dale Robinson personally, but that's just, again, because I play a really tight player pool, so I can't cover all the outcomes. But
yeah, and I think
this made a lot of sense.
Yeah, once you see it, it's always that's always the common thread in the chat is like, oh, how did I not land on this one? It's all part of it. It's because you, like Billy said earlier, especially if you play more lineups, a lot of these guys were at least within your pool and thought processes and all that. But I know, Nades, you were talking about it yesterday in the Discord, and I liked it too, is like if you had Slayton, he was a little bit cheaper to allow this stuff to be more affordable. He would have fit, like, again, not quite. You'd have to finagle it further elsewhere, but not a lot of people are putting the 2 Philly receivers without Hurts, things like that. But if you could get up to this is the thing about this stack. When people say it's unconventional of like Jameis with Robinson and then 2 Detroit, it's like a 2-2. But it's because if you could put Goff here, we would. But it's expensive. So why not just get the quarterback on the other side that still allows us to fit those 2 while everyone else is punting for Jameson Williams, David Montgomery, Slayton, etc., to force the other stuff in. So that's why it always feels like you're in the right place with not all the right pieces. But Nades, I'll let you chime in on this one. It's, again, pretty well set up. I know Andrew said for Slayton, he said this one, see, AJ Brown, Devonta, and Hurts wasn't needed. This will be a good battle for me and Alex, just a fun one, because his guy JSN did crush and most certainly deserves it and ended up on the optimal, but 2 of my 3 ended up on the winning lineup and actually go home with $1 million. So which is it here? Come on. But no, I love Alex and doing that show with him. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We've had some pretty good thoughts throughout the season. So, Nades, I'll kick it to you on this one. Any additional thoughts on the $20 Millie Maker winner?
Yeah, so the first thing I see here is Sims projections, everything were slamming. Jahmyr Gibbs correlated with Jameson Williams for the salary discount yesterday. And I went to Stack Seeker and looked at it. Almost 13 lineups had Jahmyr Gibbs with Jameson Williams. That dropped all the way down to almost 9,000. So you left about 4,000 to 5,000 lineups in the dust just going to Amon-Ra St. Brown, right? Guess who else was $5,600, right? Or $5,700, Jameson Williams. Well, why don't I just attach Wan'Dale Robinson to a cheap quarterback, right, as the PPR guy and say, hey, maybe this game is a competitive game. If it's a competitive game, then Wan'Dale Robinson, we know, is going to get the targets, right? He is the slot guy. I know a lot of us were on Slate, and myself included, as a way to kind of speed that game up and get it back to Jared Goff, right? Because most people wanted to play the Jared Goff side, right? But how do you think about that differently and kind of reverse engineer it? Well, what if this game, you don't need to speed it up? What if, perhaps, right, the Giants are competitive in this game, right, on the back of Jameis, right? Likely it's one of his receivers, and who's the most likely for that to happen is Wan'Dale Robinson, who's not just coming back off an injury as well, like Darius Slayton is, right? So I think that's the number one thing. And then the Devontae Smith, AJ Brown combo pack. I mean, people can say, yeah, this is unconventional, play 2 wide receivers without their quarterback. But I mean, there's a price gap here. Jalen Hurts was what, the 3rd or 4th highest on, or 4th highest, or highest priced, excuse me.
$2,000 more than Jameis.
Yeah, highest priced. And you need that salary, right, to unlock a different roster construction, right, attacking the Lions game, right? You're not playing Goff. You're not playing Jameson Williams like most people are in a setup like this. You're pairing Gibbs and Amon-Ra and just saying, hey, maybe they just soak up the entire end zone, and Amon-Ra soaks up all kind of the field, the catches and everything without Sam Laporta, right? Everybody forgets Amon-Ra's target share goes to like 36% or 38%, whatever it is, without Sam Laporta on the field. And just because it didn't work last week, right? Now people were kind of lower on him at the price point compared to the other additional Lions players in the setup. So that's the biggest thing I see. And then people were trying to figure out the Travion Henderson, Ramondre Stevenson, running game, right thing. Maybe it's just Hunter Henry, right, in the offense. I know we were joking about the game log watching there for Hunter Henry, but tight ends against the Bengals, I mean, really anything against the Bengals, but specifically tight ends against the Bengals, just absolutely destroy them. He's involved in this offense, and you don't have to figure out the running game, right? So I think that's some of the biggest things I see. And then you can get away playing the chalk defense, right? Myles Garrett up to 18 sacks now against Geno Smith. I mean, that's going to be a talking point the rest of the season is any defense facing the Raiders, because they literally have no offensive line. So overall, you needed two pieces to be different, and it was a correlated way, right? It wasn't a random wide receiver. It wasn't a random this. It was a correlated piece on how to attack the most popular game differently than what the field wanted to.
Yeah, and what did Jameson Williams end up getting to for ownership? I think we have it here, 22.6%. So yeah, a lot of people were looking to get there. That is one really good point of, like, people asked a lot in the Discord yesterday, like, well, what was the pivot? Again, it's easier when you have the answer sheet in front of you to be able to tell you, oh, easy. It's Wan'Dale Robinson. But the thought process of if you know Gibbs is good for a reason, there's his ownership. If you know that Amon-Ra, it's kind of figuring out how to play them and what would that look like. This was definitely a way to do so while still getting other chalk pieces in there. I will ask you this though, Billy, because this is something I think can be taken away for future purposes. Yes, Wan'Dale was the answer there in this case. And if you're not playing Jameson Williams, why not get to Wan'Dale? Plus the dudes even around Jameson Williams of Devonta, and though it's all the 5K guys, but Jameson, while using the guys that would hurt Jameson Williams, even though they're just his own. But let me ask you about the McBride madness, if you will. I'll put that name on it and coin it from this week. I think the funny thing is there's not even Michael Wilson on this lineup. Obviously, he could have been plugged in and just left the money on the table for Smith, for example, but we don't do that here. I'm just saying, what's the thought process on a week where you have the onesie position with a guy like Trey McBride, who was kind of the talking point of every show, every podcast, every breakdown, because it was important to figure that out. He was 6,800, still too cheap, great matchup. You could play two tight ends, et cetera, et cetera. What is your thoughts about handling that, especially for those that have less lineups to play with? Like, that's important, right?
So to me, and I think it was something you guys probably talked about throughout the week over at Ship It, like McBride, is still just fundamentally underpriced for his role. Like going back to week 5, week 6, whenever Brissett took over, like he's third in points per game, only behind CMC and Jonathan Taylor. And those are guys that cost $10,000. And McBride is, again, in a onesie position at 6,800. It's his highest price of the season. But if you're comparing him to other players who have put up 30-plus points, whatever it is, 3 times in the last 5 or 6 weeks, all of those guys cost $8,000, $9,000. You know what I mean? I guess George Pickens was only $7,000, but to me, those were 2 of the most underpriced guys on the slate. So to me, you don't have to be different everywhere, and you can just jam in what are the best plays. For example, I wasn't a guy I was huge on, but at his price, Emmanuel Wilson offered a lot of value at 5,300. I think I just quickly want to hit on the Jameson Williams thing. I think that if you're playing a few more lineups than, let's say, sub 10, even if it's 20 or 30, even if it's less, I was a big proponent of accounting for the Lions on every roster on yesterday. Mm-hmm. And so that means that in my portfolio of rosters, I'm going to have some duds because I'm going to play some Jameson Williams, and he got me nothing. But you know what? I'm not trying to win. I mean, I am, but I'm not trying to win on every single roster. I'm looking at it as my portfolio and saying, okay, if it's not Jameson Williams, it means it's probably Gibbs or it's probably Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I'm going to have good exposure to them across my portfolio. If I have 150 or 300, that exposure is obviously a lot larger, but I'm okay with being wrong on Jameson Williams because it just means on the other rosters, I'm probably right. Because for me, I just didn't see a spot here with Sam Laporta out, with even more consolidated offense for Detroit, a team I thought was going to score 4 or 5 touchdowns, they're likely coming through 3 players, 4 players max. So I'm just going to be willing to play at least one line on every roster. And on some rosters, I'm going to take a 0. I didn't think I'd take a 0. I thought it'd be small. One of these guys wasn't going to get there. To me, you can't look at it and say, hey, that's bad process. Like, to me, that's good process. That you're identifying the right spots. You're being directionally accurate. To me, some of the hardest things in DFS is trying to identify where the touchdowns are going to go. No one freaking knows. Like, you don't. It's easy to say, hey, Detroit's going to score a lot of points. And if you're playing a bunch of lineups, hey, I'm going to mix different combinations of what makes sense there. That's why it's so hard. It's easy to kind of say, hey, this is where the points are likeliest to go. And you can look at that even just by high level of saying team totals. That's not always the right way to go. But, you take a look at yesterday, the Ravens had a really high team total as well. No Bateman there. Like, that's a really concentrated offense too. I didn't do this, but you could easily make a rule of saying, hey, I'm going to play one of Lamar or Derrick Henry because they're likely going to score 4 or 5 touchdowns as well. And I'm going to account for that offense as well. To me, that's how I personally like to play. I go for the smaller player pool and I just try to be directionally accurate and hoping that I get the guys with the touchdowns.
Yeah.
You hit up for me, Slayton in this game or Theo Johnson. Would have been great to have Wandale, but again, I don't play 100, 200 lineups. I can't cover every angle every week.
Yeah, and like you said, so actually Theo ended up in a bunch of these too, because another piece that could make things work. If you had Jameis, Wandale, Theo with Gibbs and Amon-Ra, you kind of just fell into it if you kept playing the chalk after that. That's the other thing, is a lot of people will move off of it, but you hit on something really key there, and funny enough, it was a Detroit slate last year, and this was one of the videos, speaking of Mastermind 1-year anniversary, talked about that. I did this video. I came in 3rd in the big 222 blitz last year, and I only had 5 to 6 lineups. I ended up having 6 by the end of it, and you can watch me break down every single one of them. And guess what? I called it portfolio management. I later coined the term portfolio manipulation, and I said it's kind of like cheating for yourself. It's your portfolio. You can put whatever you want. You could be cheating yourself into a 0 if you are focusing on the Detroit Lions and they don't have the game that you want. But what I did is I have every lineup has at least Gibbs. One has Goff, Amon-Ra, Laporta. That's the one that ended up winning the 40K. And basically, it's just how I would manage the portfolio of what I'm playing. And I'm saying, look, Detroit's going to score 40 points today. This is what I'm aiming towards. It shows how I broke it all down, how I was late swap ready. And it mainly talks about what people say. It's the way to set up your lineups to have similar spots covered in different lineups to help avoid saying I had all the right pieces, but in all the wrong places. That's because you stop. You get Gibbs. You say, oh, I had Gibbs. Well, how many lines do you have been? Well, 2 of my 5. Okay, good. And who are the quarterbacks? Terrible quarterback and terrible quarterback. That's no problem. At least you landed on Gibbs, but you only had 2 lineups to get there in, and that's the end of that story. And if it hadn't have been Gibbs, did you have Montgomery lineups? Well, no. It doesn't matter because Gibbs got there anyway. He crushed. Okay, but did you have Goff lineups? No, definitely not. I played Gibbs. Okay. So Gibbs did crush yesterday, and you were correct on a 58-point guy at 30% or 35%. It doesn't matter his ownership, I guess, to say it, though. What happens when he has the bad day? You say, well, I had Gibbs because I thought he was going to crush and they were going to score 40 points. But then they do score 40 points, and you didn't need Gibbs in this example, and you didn't have any Goff. You didn't have any Laporta. You didn't, or not yesterday, he's injured, but you didn't have any Amon-Ra. You didn't have any Williams. You didn't have any Montgomery's. You should be covering yourself, because I loved how Billy said that he's not going to be, what he means is like he's not going to be able to win with every lineup. He builds every lineup with the capability of winning, but they're springboarding off of each other almost in a way where if this one doesn't win, that might clear the way for these 2 over here now that are really in good shape. Those become my rooting interest. Okay, now so-and-so gets injured. Well, slide that one under the rug. This is the go-to piece, and that's what's fun about Thanksgiving. And so probably a good segue, but we're going to get to that in a second. Anything else, Billy, you want to add on that? I just thought that was a good way to get into it, because I think it's important to remember this type of stuff before we go to the Thanksgiving preview.
No, man, I think you laid it out well. I think a lot of sites, including Ship It, you guys do a great job of like talking through like bankroll management for a whole season. To me, you're also looking at as a weekly basis as well. Okay, hey, I've got $100, $1,000, whatever your stakes is for that week, and think about yourself as, an investment, guy who does investments. And I'm laying out my portfolio, and it's really a risk. How risky are you willing to be? If you're have super conviction, you're okay to lose everything. Sure, you could go 100% Gibbs in this example. That's not me. I feel like it's very hard to identify where the touchdowns are going to flow. I think we can all do a better job of saying, hey, we really like Detroit this week. And Tambo, you laid it out there. Yeah, it's probably going to be one of 3 or 4 guys. Well, if it's not Gibbs and Gibbs isn't benefiting, who is benefiting? So to me, it's like looking at each lineup individually. It's easier to do because I don't play 300 or 200 lineups, where I'm basically saying, okay, on this lineup, I'm kind of betting on Gibbs. But if that's wrong, on the next lineup, I'm going to look at it maybe being Montgomery, or maybe it's Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson and Goff, and maybe this is a 4 passing touchdown game. And both of those lineups can't win because it's not going to be Gibbs 4 touchdowns and Goff 4 touchdowns passing. Like, it's not going to be both winning. It's likely one or the other, and you've got to be willing to say, okay, I'm not trying. I mean, you're trying to win on every lineup, but that's not realistic. You're just trying to set yourself up for what's the clearest path to first place when things break the way that they do, as the slate kind of unfolds.
Yeah, and too many people will set it up where they build their first lineup they feel really comfortable with, but they don't do that with their follow-up line. Like, they don't even consider what's in the lineup, because the reason the lineup number 1 was built was because of the Detroit 30-point plus thing. But then in lineup number 2, they're onto a totally different game, just got to cover angles and the fear of missing out. If you have limited lineups, you should have more opportunity to review and build it that way. Obviously, if you build 150, tools like SaberSim, which we have up, where you can put a portfolio build together quite easily and bounce the things off of each other automatically. That's nice too, but your inputs are your outputs. The same goes when you're hand building a 1 to 5 max, where you're saying, I'm going to do this, then I'm going to adjust for this, or I'm going to add this into the next lineup. You need to be thinking about everything as a whole and not just each lineup as its own, where you're like, oh, well, then I'll just move to another game. Did the Detroit game just disappear from your mind all of a sudden and they're not going to put up points anymore? Or what story are you telling from that perspective? So, Nades, I know you got up the Thanksgiving slate here. What's sort of your feel on it? I know Billy's excited for this, and we're going to let him chat here again on it in a second. But before we get into looking at the positions and the pricing and everything there, Nades, what's sort of your feel when it comes to the Thanksgiving slate, the staggered start, any strategy thoughts, any ideas you've got before we hop in?
Yeah, so I think it's pretty similar to last year, right? Is we have a big total in Green Bay and Detroit indoors, right? That was kind of the game you needed last year, at least to kick it off. And then we got a bigger spread late night with the Bengals heading into Baltimore. But Joe Burrow seems to be back, right? I think that's the talks is Joe Burrow's going to play in that game. That's a 51.5 total, right? So you got a 48.5 total in Green Bay and Detroit. You got a 51.5 total late night with the Bengals and the Ravens, but that's a bigger spread, right? 7-point spread. And then you got the Chiefs, right? Coming off a loss in Dallas, right? In a dome, right? So you have 2 games in a dome to kick off the slate. And then you got the big spread late, right? Where people are going to probably want to go back to Derrick Henry, right? Surprise, surprise. Derrick Henry, Mark Andrews are probably going to be pretty similar or pretty high owned, because that's just what happened this past Sunday. It's a short week, right? I think it's a much lazier slate than normal because of all the family stuff going on, right? So there's a lot more groupthink that goes into a slate like this. So I think Derrick Henry, Mark Andrews are going to kind of lead the charge a lot because of that. Not only are they playing the Bengals, but they're also the 7-point favorites at home, right? Late night to round up the slate, whereas people are going to attack the passing games more from the first 2 games, in my opinion. Is kind of broad slate overview there, but I think there's some really interesting, especially quarterback prices. I mean, Jordan Love and Jared Goff at 5,800, 5,500 in a dome in what should be a back and forth game. I think are pretty interesting in general, but looks like a pretty fun slate in general.
Yeah, Billy, I'll kick it over to you. Go ahead and just talk a little bit about the overview of it. And obviously, like I said, we did our whole course together over at Mastermind, but we're going to talk through some of that stuff here too. Like, just sort of how you see it. I know the staggered start is a bigger thing for you, and then kind of the conversation, I'm going to repost it again, probably today or tomorrow for this week, of your quoted statement of like going and pick your lane, find your lane, go 100 miles an hour and stick with it. And we talk about it. Sometimes you run into a brick wall and lose all your money. But if you do hit the Autobahn and take off, you can really get out and ahead of everybody. And that's what can lead you to the ultimate grand prize. So just talk a little bit about these shorter slates and specifically this one with the staggered start, strategy wise.
Yeah. I mean, for me, like, and maybe it's more of a mantra of just kind of 1 week season in general. Like, we're trying to win every week. That's not what I'm saying. But generally, for those of you who have played daily fantasy for a long time, that 1 week can truly make a season. If you ship a contest like Tambo did last night, like that pays for all of your losses all throughout the year. So to me, that's just the mentality I think that you have to have. It's okay if you have to be willing to lose most weeks to truly be willing to win. And I don't think people really know what it means to be truly willing to lose. We don't need to get too much into the weeds on that, but yeah, I mean, a short slate like this, I mean, I guess I'll kind of piggyback on Austin, just kind of high level, like what I like about it. And again, like pricing just came out this morning, so I haven't done a real deep dive into it. Mm-hmm. But what I like about it is we've got 3, in my opinion, great games. There are no Raiders or Browns, no offense to them, on this slate. Like we've got 3 high totals. And, I think that they've all got like a wide range of outcomes here where I don't think I'm going to be surprised if any of the games is the highest scoring game. I think the lowest is that Lions game at 48.5 and Kansas City's at 52.5. Like any of those games could be the game you had to have, or it could be that they all play out to 27, 24 games and you need pieces from all of them. So to me, there's a lot of different strategy approaches that you can take to it. And, that's some of the things that I lay out in our Mastermind course that I kind of put behind the paywall at 1 week season, is just kind of thinking through as you're building your roster, what does that mean for the rest of the slate? Like, how are you constructing that roster? How does that play out for the rest of that, the rest of that slate? If we look at one of the games, just for example, let's look at Kansas City, Dallas. That's the highest total on the slate. If that plays out to a 35-31 game, and there's 8 or 9 touchdowns in that game, like, and that's probably going to be how most people are going to build that game, is to be a high scoring passing type of affair. If it ends up being 8 or 9 touchdowns total, you're likely going to have Patrick Mahomes or Dak Prescott in your lineup, because pricing is, again, so loose at quarterback. Like, I think Lamar is the highest at 68, and then the lowest is like Jordan Love at 55. Like, there's no real savings. Like, you're going to have to probably have the highest scoring quarterback. Whereas, as when we looked at main slate for yesterday, I don't know if Jameis Winston was the highest scoring. He may have actually been, but a lot of times it's just that pay down guy that allows you to get some of those other pay up guys. That's unlikely to be the case on this slate, because you're not really getting a whole lot of savings with Jordan Love off of like Mahomes or Prescott. You're saving $800. It's probably not going to be, you don't need that. Like, pricing is so loose this week, and DraftKings does that a lot on week 1, Thanksgiving, where casual players are more abundant, because people don't want to be having to shove Luther Burden into their lineup to make that last. They want guys that they know, that, familiarity with their name. And so you see a lot of the looser pricing on slates like Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I think a couple things there that stood out. One would be for certain, there is a $5 Millie Maker on DraftKings. So the pricing is about the softest you could ever see it be, because they have to fill up a 600,000 person tournament. That's a tangent for another day, but good for them. Congrats. Like, awesome tournament. Thank you so much. But if you don't like that, go play in the $5,000 Millie Maker, basically. Just absolute disgrace. But either way, I digress. The other thing you said too is, like, when you set it up. So I guess this is the other thing. And I get it. Like, at the end of the day, you set your lineups up so you will have something saved in your CSV, or in your, again, a CSV could be, people take that as 150. You could have a CSV that has 2 single entry lineups in it. My point being, your lineups are already set in stone as, like, I want to play this. But the way it really works, without going too into the weeds, and like you say, stuff that we sort of went through behind the scenes, it's not that it's the secrets as much as kind of like it's in depth. If you're trying to take your game to a different level and figure it all out, the concepts are greater because it's like you're really worried about Green Bay and Detroit. They are game one. You are going to get the puzzle, that 1/3 of the puzzle breakdown. I always tease that like DFS is a puzzle. You don't have the full picture in front of you though. We all get the same pieces. We all play the same game, but it's whoever builds it the fastest and most correct, because we got to get it in before lock, et cetera, et cetera. In this case, you do get the puzzle, the first third of it after game one, and you kind of know what that means. So if Gibbs is chalk, let's say, and goes off in game one, and you have lineups with Gibbs, well, those are great. They're off to a hot start. Now you get to see, do I want to have those filled out with Kansas City and Dallas stacks? Do I want a mix of both? Do I want some Cincy, Baltimore? Maybe all of the above. And if you have enough lineups, you can do all of the above. But on the same note, you could say, wow, a running back at chalk that was expensive busted. Where can I make that up in these next two games? If you've already got lineups with Gibbs in it, well, you need to get different for the other two games. If you don't have Gibbs, you're thinking about, wow, these Gibbs lineups that I can really crush, what's the best way to punish them for the mistake that and the play that ended up being a mistake as part of their process in playing them, which you probably played them too. So it's like, that's where you have more information, and you just don't get that a lot, right? Like people don't realize that a lot of these peer-to-peer games, it's not often you get to know everything that happened ahead of time to be able to adjust on the fly. And that's why the strategy for the staggered start is so important. So, I'll go back to you, Billy, just on that. Anything else you want to add on the staggered start stuff, the late swap of it? Or are you good just sort of chatting through these games and some of the stuff that we can see early on? I know, like you said, no deep dive yet, but it's meant to be a first look and how you think people are going to attack this slate and maybe how we can take things and find our lane and move it to our advantage.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to give just kind of like a 10,000 foot view of what my short slate strategy is. So I think high level, my approach is that I want to play more lineups than I would on a normal main slate. That doesn't mean that I'm going to play more money. I'm normally a single entry, 3 max, 5 max guy where I'll play $100 single entry, $50 single entry. So, maybe I'll have a couple $100 in each week. On this slate, I may look to play if they put out like a $3 or a $5 type of contest, or even if I have no idea what they've got. Right now, they've only got 2 contests really released, and it's a $5 and a 44. When they release more contests, like to me, this is a week where I would probably go with 100 or 150 lineups. However, the approach that I take is I don't build, let's say I'm going to go 150 lineups. I don't build 150 unique lineups. The approach that I take is I would build 50 unique builds, and I would duplicate them. So I would run clones. So instead of 150 unique, I would take 50 lineups and I'd enter them each 3 times for that total of 150. And how I like to approach it is I will go and build those 50 only focused on the very first game. Obviously, you can't submit a roster that doesn't have a full lineup of pieces. So I'm more or less putting in dummy pieces, but I'm only focused on the very first game. And I'm saying, okay, well, let's say it plays out to a shootout. What does a shootout look like? And I'll build 10 rosters around a shootout. What if it's really low scoring? What could really low scoring? And if you guys play showdowns, you know how this kind of approach is. That's how I think you should think about every roster that you're building is, okay, just specific to this first game, I'm going to build it a couple of different ways. And your goal is to try to nail what could be, because you won't know what the puzzle looks like until all 3 games are finished. But what could be the nuts on this first game? You're just trying to build different scenarios of that. So after the first game, after you've got that puzzle, unveiled of what that likely looks like, I then generally just say, okay, maybe 40 of the 50 lineups that I've built are probably dead for first place. I'm only looking to try to get first place in these contests. So to me, I may build 50 of these lineups, and they'll be clones. I may build 50 of these lineups and more or less discard. This is not an approach for the faint of heart. I may discard 40 of the 50 after the first game and say, yes, if I have time, I'll go and try to make some adjustments to try to get these to min cash, but they're dead for the top of the leaderboard just based on how the first game played out. Because I'm rambling here, but what makes a 3-game slate more difficult than an 11-game slate, for example, is there's not as many pivots. Like you, in a big contest with 600,000 people, you're probably going to have to get the complete nuts to win because there's only so many combinations. So I'll look at it and say, okay, maybe I've got 10 lineups that played to the game being a shootout, and it ended up being, a 35-31 score with the Packers and the Lions. I'll then go through each of those 10 lineups that I have, and because I have clones of them, I have different kind of tributaries of how I can build out the next game. Does that all make sense? Are you guys following that? Am I explaining this well?
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to build each lineup as I get more information, and I'm willing to discard more or less the ones that I know are wrong because I'm only trying to get to the top. And you're trying to just give yourself a lot of different outs. Okay, hey, I nailed the first game, but I only have one roster. Well, it's still really hard to try to get the next 2 pieces right. But if you give yourself clones, you've now got multiple attempts to try to play out the second and the third game of different scenarios of how those could play out. So that's how I like to approach it is kind of with a clone approach. And I think we can leave it there as just kind of high level.
Yeah, I'll say this, like just to sort of summarize too, because you said it earlier. You said, you didn't want to sort of elaborate on what truly willing to lose was. And I know it's actually meant in the, I know exactly what you mean, but I'm saying you can also apply it to this theory of, like you said, you're literally willing to discard those because you are looking how many of these could possibly win first. If it is down to 8 to 10, well, then let me focus on those 8 to 10, put myself in the best position on those. And if I have time, I'll go back and edit them. And then from the clone perspective, just in case it wasn't for everybody or not fully understanding it, just a numbers breakdown is, let's say you have 50 lineups and you want to run 10 with Gibbs, 10 with Montgomery. I'm shortening this. Obviously, you have 10 with Jared Goff, Amon-Ra, and Jameson Williams. You have 5 with just Jared Goff and Jameson Williams. You have 10 with the Love side of things and 10 with Jacobs, assuming he's back. Eventually you're at your 50 lineups. I'm just, rambling the numbers off, but I'm saying that he's starting them and saying it doesn't matter what else is in the lineup because I'm going to see game 1 play out. When the Jacobs lineups bust and the Montgomery lineups bust and the Jameson Williams lineups bust, in that example, boom, into the trash they go, mindset-wise. I'll get to them, I will, but I only have X amount of time before the next game. But look at this. My Goff, Amon-Ra, Brock Wright lineups that I ended up with 3 of those, they're all in phenomenal shape. So now I need to build the best versions, the best 3 versions of those with the 2 games remaining. And how you choose to do it, up to you. That's your lane. But if you say, I definitely want one with the Derrick Henry in it, because that's going to make sense. Actually, you know what? Looking at these running backs, I'm going to put him in 2 of those out of the 3 because I think he's so much more likely out of what's left on this slate to take out the Gibbs lineups that would kind of would have fit Gibbs earlier and they busted, let's say, because it was the passing stack that went off, and then you go with this. So when you can put something together like that and understand it, it's not going to be for everybody. I would start smaller, right? Maybe 50 is not your jam right out of the gates, and you start with 20, but you're just building for scenarios in the first game. Maybe you leave 5 behind or 2 behind that have nothing in them. And you say, I'm going to play for the first game being a bust. And it gets really spread out because we know the Packers can spread it out. Fellow Cheesehead over here, our Mr. Nades, man, we always gets made fun of, but we love when he's on to talk about it. And then you got the Detroit side. If that spreads out, maybe you don't even end up needing full scores from these guys. And I'm going to have 2 just in case. And guess what? Even if 1 or 2 guys go off in the game 1, then you get those 2 lineups to think about who went off, at what position, how am I going to make it up? What would be a way I could make it up to get those points from somebody else? Even though if you get a 58 from Gibbs again, yeah, it could be in trouble. But it's just, you get more control over your lineups when you do it that way with the staggered start, and you don't usually get that opportunity. Nades, I'll kick it over to you, man, just to talk about it a little bit. Anything else you want to add? Our stat said one more point quick. We got a little chat going on here. Go ahead, Stat. Chime in.
And then I think a big key thing that you should consider based on the exact example that you just gave, the roster that smashes that you have. Is it a Jordan Love, Wicks, Romeo Dobbs double stack that is completely unowned? And that's what smashed, and you have it. If that's what smashed and you have it, just think you have now done enough that you don't have to be super contrarian the rest of the way. You can play what's going to be chalk in Derrick Henry or CeeDee Lamb. I don't know what's going to be chalk, Rashee Rice, but you can play into what is the absolute best plays. And theoretically, on one of those clones, you absolutely should play all of the chalk in the second game to just see if that keeps you on pace.
Yes, because your separators already came from early. Like you said, you've already got the separators. And I talk about
already got the separator.
Where
if you don't have the separator, if it's that Goff, Amon-Ra, Gibbs stack like yesterday that goes off and it's super high owned, in one of those clones, I would try to do something a little different in Kansas City, Dallas. I'll probably keep one of them kind of be more of a chalky piece. But if you're really going to win, you can't do what's the most likely outcome in all three games. Because that's in a 600,000 person contest, that lineup, if it fits salary-wise, is going to be duped hundreds of times. So even if you win, you don't really win. You're gonna be splitting the prize with hundreds of people. So that's all. Nate, sorry for clogging up all the space.
No, you're good. No, you're good. You're good for sure. And basically, just it's taking the slate right and breaking it down into a 3 or a 5 max, right? Just because, but you have 20 or 40, 30, 50, whatever, however many lineups, right? So take it for the 20 max, right? The $3 20 max that I'm sure they'll post is probably going to be, I don't know, 100 and some thousand people in it. And same thing with the $1, right? So you can play $80 in your contest, $80 total, but now you have 40 rosters, right? So it's not to go say you're going to play every single quarterback in all 40. You still have to cut down your pool, right, to approach it differently. So maybe you're running four lineups, but you have 10 duplications of each one, right? To Stats and Tambo's point, because now you have more pieces, right? To potentially, hey, maybe you did in one of those lineups get the right pieces, right? The must-have-its, right? The have-to-have-it scores from the first game. Now you can approach it with 10 different avenues on how to attack Kansas City and Dallas, and maybe Love or Goff is the 30-point, 35-point quarterback that you have to have, right? Yeah, could these other guys match that? But chances are, if one of those guys in that first game, right, and you have them scores the 30 to 35 at their price points with the other high-priced studs on the slate, the Derrick Henrys, the Rashee Rices, CeeDee Lambs, Pickens, those guys of the world, you're going to that $1,500 savings or $1,200 savings, whatever it is, down to Goff and Love. Now you have more avenues than the rest of the field does, and the rest of the field is just trying to catch up and min cash, right? Whereas you have a chance to ship the entire thing, right, which you're hoping for. So I think approaching it like this is very unique. Not many people do it. I was in contention all the way up until the last game last year doing this with my 20 max stuff. So try it out. I think it's a good way, and that way you can focus your time, right? Everybody, we're all with family, we're all around the turkey dinner, right? Whether you believe in hoop side of the story or not, from yesterday, you still have a family, and you still don't want to be tied in 100%. So if you have 10 lineups now to focus on versus 50, because the other 40 are dead, right? Well, now you just focus on those 10, and you're shooting for first place. So I think it's a really good way to approach the slate in general.
Yeah, this is a good point too. Like, obviously the slate dictates it. This year, this is the slate. Last year was different. If, I wanted the Joe Flacco revenge game for this slate, but now it looks like Joe Burrow is going to be back instead. So we still get a Joey, but it's going to be a Joey Burrow instead of a Joey Flacco. But look at this. Jason says, do you run any of these clones with 0 plays from the first game? I know we kind of just touched on it, but said seems risky here, but it could really pay off if it busts. Did you want to add to that stat just about from like a slate dynamics perspective? Obviously in this case, we know the slate, we see what it is, but man, like Amon-Ra 78, Jameson, these prices are kind of insane. So I guess like it is tricky, but what's your thoughts on Jason's question here?
I think it's totally viable. I think that, and leaning into the example that Austin just gave, like I think that if this is kind of outside of your comfort zone, I love that suggestion of the $3.20 max. Like if you're a typically a guy who plays 5 to 10 lineups, go ahead and play 5 to 10 lineups again on this slate and enter those 220 maxes. You can clone your lineups 4 times instead of 3. And now you've got 40 lineups from the 10 that you normally build. I love that approach for someone who this is a little uncomfortable for. I think it's a great way for you to try it and it not be a huge financial burden. But to answer the question, I didn't catch his name, but to answer the question around the first game from Jason, I think that if I'm only building 10 lineups in the example that Austin gave, and I'm cloning, if I'm only building 10, I'm personally probably not completely fading a game. If I'm building 50 to put into 150 max, I'd probably run 1 or 2 that's completely fade the game because of how much leverage you get if that's right. Because if the whole first game really fades, or there's no one who puts up a had to have it type score, I put out an article every year that'll be out on 1 week season. At the end, we'll do a quick little promo code for how you can sign up at a big discount there. I kind of lay out who has those had to have it scores in their range of outcomes. I think that's one thing that a lot of people don't realize. Like if we take a 20-point score, regardless of salary, of like who could have a had to have it type score. If you throw out quarterbacks, so only skill position players, there's only 13 of those guys on the entire slate of 6 teams. There's only 2 guys on every team that have even put up 20 points more than once this season. So it's possible that you get no had to have it scores out of the first game. To me, that's just kind of a risk tolerance thing. If you're building a bunch of lineups, I do it with 1 or 2 of them for sure.
And I'm also considering the slate. So my follow-up to that would just be like, this is a 49. It's actually, surprisingly enough, I know it's the Lions. I know it's the Packers. I get it. But it's actually the lowest total on the slate. And that doesn't necessarily mean anything because to Stat's point, which was great, of it still matters what does the individual play do? Well, you have to think. And I know there's a million different scenarios. Yesterday's an 11-gamer. This is a 3-gamer. But just to give you an example, $4,800 Michael Wilson had a pretty great day yesterday, and you didn't have to have him to win the money. He ended up on the optimal, sure, but I'm saying like there were still ways to get around it. Now, less options on this slate, understood, but just noting it is if you got to look at it to me like from the ceiling guys, like the Gibbs, the Amon-Ra's, the Jameson Williams, like that's kind of, maybe you could frame some of those Packers in there, but not enough people will own them. So it's like, who has the ceilings and who's actually going to have the highest ownership? And then think about those guys. And then it becomes a math problem of like Stat said, of how many lineups do you have and what's your risk tolerance? Because at that point, there is a scenario where Jameson Williams does have that bounce back game at this low price tag, but the bounce back game is for like 20 points. And you're like, damn, that's pretty good for 4,800. If I could take that right now, I would. But does it end up? I don't know. Like, does that actually end up on the winner? We don't know. Shout out to Neil Orfield. I've done an interview with him over on Mastermind, exclusive interview behind the scenes, talking his game and theory and process. And he always does like the updates throughout the slate of like so far what rank. And again, it's percentage based. It's a thought process thing, but I love it. I think a lot of DFS players do and follow him for that reason. Is like just another fun add-on in the content that he does, where it's like, who do you think you're going to need? Who's like, okay, now this guy, you're definitely going to need this one. You're like, all right, that's kind of how you can figure this stuff out as you go along. There's nothing that says if Jameson Williams puts up 20 that you have to have him. It's a great score for $4,800 and his low price tag and everything on this slate, but there is a ton of receivers versus if somehow Musgrave goes off in the first game for 25. Well, he's a onesie position, and yes, there is other tight ends on the slate, and Kelsey could beat him, and Ferguson, and Andrews, whatever. But that's a big thing to start the slate off. Where Musgrave has 25, you're looking to figure out how am I going to make that up. Now you can do it, but it's just noting things like that are all the kind of concepts that you need to consider, and why it's more to the game than just picking the who of the plays, right? The how, the why, what does it mean? What do I do next? How do I act upon it? That's kind of what we talk about. Real quick, we'll probably stick around another 5-10 minutes here, guys, just to let everybody get their stuff in at the end too. But if you go to quarterback, Nades, real quick, Billy brought this up. We're not going to do a full overview. I liked Billy's version of like 10,000 above. Billy will have another show later in the week. Hoop, Title, and myself will have our show later in the week. This week, actually, Title is out. It's going to be Alex Blickel on with us. So, Stats will have his show. We'll be able to post those links in the chat so you guys can get fully ready for Thanksgiving. But quarterback's pretty similar priced. Go to running back for a second. Gibbs, 8,800. Henry, only 73. Definitely going to be very popular for those two. There'll be others, but just noting, like, people can get to them. We just saw what Gibbs did. We saw what Henry did. It still is Baltimore and Detroit at home in both spots. Go to tight end. We'll skip wide receiver for a second. I'm not sure how this one will be handled fully, but when you have like Kelsey, Andrews, Ferguson, whatever, defense doesn't matter. But I'm most curious to spend the last few minutes here on wide receiver, Nades. Your first thoughts, then I'll get Billy's final thoughts and where you can find him. But Nades, wide receiver, somebody said today is, could Jamar Chase be 108% owned on this slate? It's not possible, obviously, but just it feels like a situation where he's going to be pretty highly owned. And then there's a bunch of options after it. And I noted the Pickens Lamb thing finally got the pricing right, but it's only $100. So what are you thinking, Nades? First thoughts here at wide receiver. We'll finish on that.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's going to flock to play Jamar Chase just because all the talks of the Ravens secondary, but more so because Joe Burrow's coming back, right? And now they can finally play Jamar Chase with the guy that they love to play him with, right? So naturally, Chase is going to have all the ownership. Higgins is going to be somewhat held in check at 6K because of the other guys around him, right? You got Zay Flowers as an easy run back in that game when people are already playing Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow stuff, right? So right there, naturally going to hold T. Higgins in place. I think what's interesting is the drop-off in price, right? After T. Higgins, the Jameson Williams, Watson, Dobbs, Worthy, Jaden Reed's not gonna come back this week, obviously. Hollywood Brown, Matthew Golden if he comes back, Bateman if he's back, right? All of those guys, I mean, there's a lot of guys, right? If you play Jameson Williams and he doesn't get there, Watson, Dobbs, Worthy, Yoshivas, Hollywood Brown, Golden, Wicks, Bateman, all of these guys, they're all priced within $1,000 of each other, right? That's going to be a section that you're going to have to get right? Because potentially you could play 4 wide receivers on any roster, right? And it could be a 4 wide receiver optimal that you need, right? So getting this range right, I think is going to be the most important range because you're going to have to play at least one of them, right? You can't just go in and play Jahmyr Gibbs, Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Rashee Rice, Pickens, right? We do play a salary-based game. So you have to get that range right. I think that's going to be the most important range to get right is that $4,800 to $3,800 range or $3,500 range down to Wicks, basically. Wicks up to Jameson Williams, I think, is going to be the range that's going to separate. And most people say, yeah, no shit. But I think that's truly a talking point because there's a lot of guys in games, right? The Kansas City, right? The Worthy stuff in there, the Hollywood Brown stuff in there, the Watson, Dobbs, Jameson Williams stuff from the first game. So I think that's the main point right there from wide receivers, that kind of value range, if you will.
Yeah, big news. Like that's why I brought it up off the top. You didn't see yesterday as Higgins was concussed. So, well, we'll see how it actually plays out and what ends up happening by Thursday, but it is a quick turnaround. Obviously, something to look into, but that would just, we've seen Jamar Chase be 90% on these shorter slates anyway, the 2 gamers and stuff like that. This could just be a spot where he gets to a really big number, but for potentially good reason. This stuff, and I love Jerry Matt. He's my guy. I actually work with him over in the Mastermind program and stuff, but just looking at this, he says, about Dak dropping passes, Lamb dropping passes from Dak. If it's CD Lamb, I don't care as much. Like, to me, that's the thing. And I don't think people will either. So, Billy, I want to get your take on this. I think Lamb still comes. Again, this is just first take. Don't care. Like, whatever happens. But I think we could see Lamb come in higher than Pickens still because people still go by the name. And I also think in the year 2025, almost 2026, people happily go back to Jameson Williams at this price too, because a lot of what happens is more dictated by price than anything else. We saw Brock Bowers a couple of weeks ago on the Showdown slate or a week and a half ago where it was great matchup, fine, but it was also based on price. We just saw Trey McBride, again, valid, very legit, but based on matchup and price still factored in more, which leads to the ownership. I think Williams, Lamb, Chase could be a very common trio that you see in lineups with some combo of like Rice and Amon-Ra and those guys too. But what's your thoughts on this wide receiver spot here?
I mean, I'll give quick thoughts on kind of the top of the board just in general. Like, yeah, I think if T. Higgins doesn't clear concussion protocol, like Jamar Chase is going to be the highest owned wide receiver. I don't think it's going to be close. People are just going to pencil him in. I think a really intriguing spot is for Rashee Rice. Cowboys have gotten smashed by elite wide receivers. Like, I'll just rattle off because the name is Stat ATL. 167 and 2 to Malik Neighbors, 110 and a touchdown to AJ Brown last night, 142 and a touchdown to Wan'Dale Robinson, 101 and a touchdown to Luther Burden, only 58 yards, but 3 touchdowns to Romeo Doubs. Troy Franklin went for 90 and 2 touchdowns. Marvin Harrison went for just under 100, like 97 and a touchdown. Like, this is a spot where Kansas City has to keep winning. I know they squeaked out that win yesterday, but they're still like in the 10th spot in the like current playoff standings. Like, they have to keep winning, and Dallas is just getting smashed by wide receiver ones. So I think that Rashee Rice is probably the best play on the board at wide receiver over Jamar Chase, in my opinion. And you get a little bit of that price discount. And then when you talk about Pickens and Lamb, like, Lamb is definitely the bigger name. Lamb hasn't topped 25 points all season, whereas George Pickens has 4 games above 32 points. So I think that if Lamb is higher owned, which I think he will be because of the name recognition, and you're going to have so many more casuals, to me, I think that's just wrong. But I think they're both good plays. And this is a slate, because pricing is loose or looser, that if anybody puts up 25 or more points, they're probably going to have to be on a roster. Like, you may be able to, come around. Like, if it's 26 points from Pickens at 7,000, like, you may be able to get there if some cheaper guys put up a decent score. But in general, like, I think any guy that could go for 25 plus points, like, you kind of have to be, I don't want to say accounting for on every roster, but I think you should be thinking through, okay, if if Rashee Rice, or Rashee Rice, however you actually say his first name, if he completely fails, I don't think that Kansas City is going to fail in this matchup in a dome. Like, I would probably have Travis Kelce on that bill if I don't have Rashee Rice. Or maybe I would consider Kareem Hunt, which if there's no wide receivers getting there, Kansas City, or maybe it's Kansas City D. Like, to me, that's how I want to think through these builds of, like, where are the smash spots? Again, you alluded to, I know we don't want to spend a lot of time on running back, but like Derrick Henry against the Bengals, like, Cincinnati has given up huge games to running backs. They've given up huge games to tight ends. You saw it again just yesterday with Hunter Henry going for 115 in the touchdown. Like, there have been 2 tight ends that have had better games than that 7, 115, and 1. Like, Freiermuth went for over 100 with 2 touchdowns. Colson Loveland went for over 100 with 2 touchdowns. Like, tight ends are smashing the Bengals. So, I think you're going to see Mark Andrews be mega chalk. I think you're going to see Derrick Henry be mega chalk. So just all things to kind of consider there. But yeah,
what you got to consider too when you're building out early, like you said. I'm sorry to cut you off, but just to note, I'll let you get your final thoughts in here in a second. But just for the Green Bay stuff, like, imagine you build a Love, for example, Dobbs. If people aren't on Williams in that game, Jameson Williams at 4,800, they might go to Watson at 4,700. But then Dobbs is at 4,600. And if Dobbs has a 2 touchdown game, that could be really good for Love. Love rosters could leave you the money for. You're already super different. You probably have separators already. And then maybe that leaves you the money for Andrews and Henry later on, but you're in good shape. So now you don't have to worry about it. But if you have a different lineup that busts early on, going to those guys is not separating you. It's just lumping you even further into the same pack everybody else is in. So thinking about things like that. And then also with quarterbacks, like, anybody who's not, I say never Mahomes. People know that's for classic main slates on a 3-gamer. You can definitely play. It's 3 games only. So just noting that. But the concept of thinking about, if people aren't on Mahomes, they likely still want a piece of it. So you know what that means in the non-Mahomes lineups. You're going to see more Rice, more Kelce, because then people say, how do I get a piece of that game if I'm not on Mahomes? And the answer might end up being, you want Mahomes, Rice, and Kelce and then you can still put Derrick Henry in there, and it takes away from Mark Andrews. Or you put a Zay Flowers and split the difference on them or something like that. So lots of different ways you can play it. I think it's going to be a fun slate. We'll have a ton more content on it throughout the week. Billy, thank you so much for doing this, man. Let the people know everything you've got going on. I know you got a special promo code for 1 week season, everything you're doing over there on X, etc., and where they can find you.
Yeah, got a lot of great stuff going over at 1 week season. I've got a promo code that's good through Friday. Promo code is Black Friday 25, like 2025, like the year. It is rest of season, all content. It is $46 for the remainder of the season. Thank you. That's the code. Would love it if you'd come over and check us out. I think you'll either find it's for you or it's not. You guys over at Ship It do an awesome job. Obviously, I'm biased. I think we do a great job too. We take things from a little bit of a different perspective. Not that one is better or different. Like, I think some people come and say, hey, I think Ship It just really resonates with me. Like, I love how you guys think through things. People come to 1 week season and kind of say the same thing. Some people, have multiple memberships.
We got a lot of crossover at both for sure.
A lot of crossover. So, and if you want to give me a follow, I'm reasonably active on Twitter. I still don't call it X because I'm #old. It's just @ATL. You can find me over there on Twitter, and I've got a YouTube channel that is kind of a new YouTube channel that is just @ATL on YouTube. I do a lot of playoff best ball and best ball content, really high into the playoff best ball. I think that's really awesome. You referenced Neil Orfield earlier. Awesome dude. I've done some content with him specific to playoff best ball. So be really jumping into those streets here in the next couple weeks. And
awesome.
Thanks for having me on. I didn't say thank you yet.
No, you did enough. Thank you so much, man. And Nades, I'll let you get your final thoughts in, man, before we get out of here. Anything else you want to add?
No, appreciate Stat jumping on. Good guy, fellow bourbon friend there too. So always good, but no, appreciate it. Looking forward to this slate. And I dropped it in the chat. I think a lot of teams start Burrow, Gibbs, Henry, Chase, and then find out value, right? Because Burrow's coming back. He's $6K. He's the cheapest of the stud quarterbacks that people want to crown studs. It naturally correlates with Chase, and then Henry is the bring back, right? And then people will just want Jahmyr Gibbs because he just went off for 55 fantasy points, right? So, and you can easily make it work, especially if Higgins is out, right? Guess what? Easy add in Yoshi Vosh as a value play there, because if you do that start, it gives you $39,800 or $3,980 left for your spots. Obviously, defense is cheaper, so I think that's an interesting point. And talking about the common build, I know you'll do that a lot on the Wednesday show with Alex Blicko and Hoop talking that. So that's another free show too for the people if you're looking for content there on how to kind of approach this slate and put it all together and hopefully find your way to the top.
Yeah, for sure. If you guys have anything else, reach out. You can find me at ToeTagginTambo on X. And then if you want to get into DFS Mastermind Project over at Ship It Nation, I mentioned we'll be wrapping up the one-time membership. I'll send out an email today so everybody knows and is in on this, but it'll be gone at the end of 2025, and it will move to just standalone courses and add-ons, and you can get each one. That's better for the one-time members because they already got all those, and will continue to get all the new stuff. Everything else will be standalone moving forward. So part of the project was changing things up and sort of working along the fly. There's a lot of members in there now that are enjoying it. So check us out there. If you want to go to Ship It Nation, you can get in 5 days for $19. Get access right away there. Myself, Hoop, and Alex will be back on Wednesday to break down the Thanksgiving slate, but we'll be back, myself, Hoop, and Title this afternoon at 2 p.m. Eastern to break down the Monday Night Football showdown slate. So that's going to do it for this one, guys. Thanks again so much to Billy for hopping on, for Nades, for Billy, and for myself, ToeTagginTambo. Let's ship it.